Like most fans, you probably saw this and were thinking,
how is this possible?
And I was right there with you. I mean, how did the Damocles come back? Didn't they send it into the sun along with the remaining FLEIJAs after the Zero Requiem? I initially made a video speculating on all of this so I could later on compare my initial thoughts to what we learned. Well, since we've now seen the Damocles in action, including how the 7 shining stars take it down, learned from the pamphlet about the Damocles, and even got insights from Nina in this episode, I think it's finally time to address the Damocles controversy. In this video, I will answer where the Damocles came from, why Neo Britannia chose to use it, how it was utilized in the show, and express my final judgment on it now knowing everything about it. This one is going to be a bumpy ride, so let's get started. So question 1, where did this Damocles come from? Did they build it from scratch? Well, it was an unfinished backup Damocles that the Totemo agency worked on in addition to the one that Schneizel used. This backup was inferior to the main one since it couldn't operate at high altitudes. After the Zero Requiem, the main Damocles was sent into the sun and the backup was left abandoned. Norlon acquired it during the raid on the Hokkaido block and decided to continue its construction. It's not clear if this Damocles was in Cambodia or how Norlon learned of its existence. While I know that Norlon had the Damocles during the invasion of the Hokkaido block, it's not clear when they finished it and transported it to the Hokkaido block. I also don't know how Norlon physically acquired something that large since it was incomplete. Did they transport it in pieces, if at all? We don't learn much about this. Next question. Where did Norlon get the FLEIJAs? According to Nina, FLEIJAs are difficult to create, so Neo Britannia didn't make their own. Instead, they acquired leftover FLEIJAs that Schneizel was going to use in the final battle against Lelouch. She speculated they couldn't have more than 3 FLEIJAs. Here's how Neo Britannia actually acquired the leftover FLEIJAs. After gaining control of the Damocles, Lelouch didn't remove all the FLEIJAs because of the potential dangers in doing so. So the leftover FLEIJAs were reclaimed by former Britannian military officers hiding in Asia and Canada. Those traitors brought the FLEIJAs to the Neo Britannians, and that's how all this nonsense happened. Moving on, why did Neo Britannia acquire the Damocles? They used it to suppress the Hokkaido region. Not exactly sure how though. Maybe they used it for ground assaults. I have no idea. According to Cornelia, the Damocles and the FLEIJA made them act cautiously, so I assume that Neo Britannia used it as a deterrent. Then we get to the big one. How the Damocles was used during the events of the story. Nina Einstein arrived at the 7 Shining Stars base in episode 4 with a brand new FLEIJA eliminator. This one has an easier activation condition. After driving out the resistant forces so they could all gather in one place, Divok makes a public address that they will wipe out the Sapro ghetto using the Damocles and FLEIJA. Then we see him launch the Damocles in the air. In episode 5, the 7 Shining Stars begin their counter-offensive. They attack the Damocles on the ground and by air. Rose leads the charge using the Z Artemis and breaks through the Blaze Luminous Shield using an anti-Blaze Luminous countermeasure. This allows the rest of the VTOLs carrying Nightmare frames to transport them and the bombs on the Damocles itself. Rose fails to take control of the Damocles from within, but at least the other forces take out the 2nd and 4th float units. Despite the damage, Divok still orders the launch of a FLEIJA that is intercepted by Ash using the new FLEIJA eliminator. Rose heads back to Nina to acquire another one. Thanks to Tomi's sacrifice, Divok couldn't use the Damocles to fire another FLEIJA and instead tried to do it the old-fashioned way. Rosa makes it back in time with the FLEIJA eliminator, combines her Z Artemis with Ash's Z Apollo to form the Z Ortigia, and they stop the FLEIJA from firing and also killing Divok in the process. Then Kristoff appears out of the blue, launches the 3rd and final FLEIJA to take out the Damocles, causing it to fall. but Jose is able to take control of the Damocles long enough to guide it to a safe location. Then she helps Haruka provide cover, allowing everyone to escape. Everyone lived, so it's intro time. There's a lot to discuss here. Let's start with the elephant in the room. The Damocles return was purely done for nostalgia purposes. It seemingly served almost no purpose in the story other than allowing the creators to recreate the moments from the original anime. As I said before, there are other ways to fire off FLEIJAs without the Damocles, but Neo Britannia still chose to use it. Kristoff's actions in this episode literally prove this. This is even more confusing because this Damocles can't achieve air superiority like the main one, so why even waste the resources in creating it? Why not instead use those resources to create smaller airships to fire the FLEIJAs from, like a better version of Kristoff's ship or similar to the ones we saw in Turn 6. They also could build better versions of those cannons from Akito the Exiled. Neo Britannia only has 3 FLEIJAs and no means to make any more, so they can't dominate the world with the Damocles as Schneizel planned on doing. So it seems like Norlon was hoping these FLEIJAs would keep the Black Knights off their backs, which is perplexing. Considering all the new countermeasures against the Damocles Blade's luminous shields, it really puts into question why Neo Britannia wasted time with this in addition to everything else I just mentioned. That goes double for the FLEIJAs since Nina created a brand new FLEIJA eliminator. For those that argue that Norlon didn't think that these resistance groups would have countermeasures, consider the following. Does Norlon really think that the creators of the FLEIJA and the Blade's luminous shields wouldn't eventually create powerful countermeasures later on? They had this Damocles for over 4 years. That gives the Black Knights plenty of time to do this. Keep in mind, the Black Knights also had 3 years before that to create these countermeasures. But for now, he has to assume with the recent actions from the nameless mercenaries that the Black Knights are assisting the 7 Shining Stars. Norlon has been hyped as someone to not be trifled with, so I can't buy this excuse. Going a step further, if a bunch of small resistant groups using brand new countermeasures can take out the Damocles, it makes you wonder why the Black Knights didn't try this before with those resistant groups or send their own forces in. From here, we now go to the next problem, which relates to how Neo Britannia acquired the Damocles along with the FLEIJAs. So it was revealed in the pamphlets that following the Zero Requiem, there was this movement in the UFN to demilitarize the world. This involved getting rid of the nightmare frames. So why wouldn't they destroy the backup Damocles as well? Seems like a pretty obvious thing to do if this is your long-term goal. Even putting that aside, why wouldn't they destroy the backup as a safety measure? But since they didn't, it made everyone look dumb, and unfortunately this included Lelouch, because he decided to not destroy all the FLEIJAs and left them in a position where military officers could just steal them. It's just character assassination, so this plot can even exist. Even if I accept the stupid idea to not get rid of the FLEIJAs, why was the security protecting it so terrible? The only positive part about this development is that it follows the plot of Oz of the Reflection, where Lelouch removed the FLEIJAs from the Damocles when Maribel took it over as it flew over Spain. Alderaan led a team to take over the Damocles, while Cornelia led forces to take out Lelouch. Alderaan's team didn't find any FLEIJAs when they boarded the Damocles, so taking that into consideration, it follows that some of the FLEIJAs could have gone unaccounted for. That doesn't justify the other problems, but at least they are trying to maintain some continuity. Now let's talk about how the Damocles was used in the story. Besides it being pointless, they also made it look like a joke. This once powerful weapon that could terrorize the world was defeated by a small resistance group. I have mixed feelings about this. It lessens the significance of Lelouch and Saku's accomplishment, not only because it's easier to take down, but the fact it came back at all. As I said earlier, it only exists for member berries. But on the other end, it also shows how far everyone has come since the Zero Requiem. The world has come together to create new means to prevent something like the Damocles from ever being a threat again, even if that is due to their incompetence. This does align with the Zero Requiem because it was designed to unite the world to handle future conflicts. Another important thing to consider is that Suzaku walked so Ash could run. Nina could only create a better version of the Eliminator thanks to Suzaku and Lelouch's efforts. It is also important to remember that this was an older model, so it makes sense that modern tech could take it out. I do wonder why the Damocles didn't get an upgrade, but I guess in the grand scheme, it wasn't part of Norlan's plan. So I understand what they were trying to do, but ultimately would have preferred if they didn't go in this direction. Next we have the lore issues here. So it's stated in the pamphlet that the Satumpe wall causes technology like the floating system's energy consumption to increase, rendering it unstable. So then why is the Damocles able to fly when it uses that technology? The same goes for the VTOLs, Kristoff's airship, and the Z Artemis. The show never explains why the wall doesn't ruin their systems. Considering this is the reason why we don't have Zaku destroy everyone with the Lancelot sin, maybe priority should have been given to stay consistent with your crappy lore over abandoning it just to recapture the magic of the original anime. Let's compare what we learned to what I discussed in my initial video. So it's not clear if the plans to create a Damocles or the FLEIJAs no longer exist. Hopefully Lelouch got rid of them. Well, at least we know that making a FLEIJA isn't easy, so don't expect anyone in the future to make them, especially since Nina has already created an improved Eliminator and probably will have a better version later on. It was disappointing to learn that the Damocles and the FLEIJAs return was due to the incompetence of so many people, but that was predictably the only way this could have occurred. They still don't address how Neo Britannia had the resources to finish it or even run the Damocles. For those that don't know, according to the wiki, it requires thousands of people to operate. I didn't realize that they had that kind of manpower. At least the retcon that the Hokkaido block had the second largest supply of Sakuradite somewhat lessens the resource issue. They also didn't address how Neo Britannia had the information to finish the Damocles. Were there former members of the Totemal Agency helping them out? The entire acquisition and reconstruction are a mystery. They just say it happened and expect you to take their word for it. Well, I don't. The Damocles return is a symptom of a much larger problem with the series, something that I've discussed several times now. The desire to recapture the magic of the original anime without understanding exactly why those moments work to begin with. Despite all the problems this created, it was at least nice to see Nina come back to finally finish off the FLEIJAs for good. I get the feeling something better is going to come from this. I just hope it was worth it.